Greetings and welcome. My name's Dan Gudgel. I'm a Soto Zen priest and one of the resident priests at San Francisco Zen Center. This is a demonstration video to go with a ritual manual for making a Daihi Shin Dharani protective knot amulet. It is for making exactly this sort of knot amulet, which I have been wearing for the last few weeks, sort of like a spiritual friendship bracelet. This ritual manual for the Daihi Shin Dharani protective knot amulet was extracted and adapted from the Nilakantha Dharani Sutra. I compiled the elements of that sutra that talk specifically about chanting the Dharani and tying knots in colored thread, and put them together into a single form that could be followed. This ritual manual and this video are being created as a companion piece for a class currently being taught on the Daihi Shin Dharani. And this is offered just in a spirit of helping to investigate further this particular piece of the Soto Zen liturgy, and to deepen our intention and our practice around chanting this particular ancient wisdom text. As there is no living tradition that I am aware of, specifically of making these knot amulets, I do encourage any students and practitioners out there to also speak to your own teachers about engaging in this practice and how it may fit with other investigations that you may be doing in your practice journey. So let's begin. Before beginning this process, I have lit a candle and offered incense at my own home altar. I also washed my hands and face and made sure that I was wearing appropriate clothing. I also have turned off all music and electronic devices so that I can focus on this as a sacred and ritual activity. So I have prepared 5 colored threads as indicated in the ritual manual, and I am using this colored thread, which is essentially the weight of a kitchen twine. In the instructions for this particular ritual, I do mention using 2 meters of each colored twine, and that actually, I realize, is perhaps specific to this weight of twine. If you're using a thinner thread, thinner or thicker, then you may find you need a different length in order to get 21 knots to fit comfortably on this thread. So, having prepared my thread previously, cut them all to the same length, I am now going to line them up so that their ends are together. And then just straighten them out so they are not tangled or twisted. So we begin this process first by chanting a chant from the Nilakantha Dharani Sutra, which is given to us in the sutra by Avalokiteshvara. And before declaiming the chant, Avalokiteshvara says, If there are monks, nuns, lay people, pure youth or maidens who wish to recite and hold this mantra, they should first arouse their great, merciful, and compassionate hearts for all living beings, and follow me in making these vows. And then we recite once. Namo, great compassionate Avalokiteshvara, may I quickly know all dharmas. Namo, great compassionate Avalokiteshvara, may I soon obtain the wisdom I. Namo, great compassionate Avalokiteshvara, may I quickly ferry all living beings to the shore of liberation. Namo, great compassionate Avalokiteshvara, may I soon obtain virtuous, skillful means to enlighten various living beings. Namo, great compassionate Avalokiteshvara, may I quickly board the Prajna boat. Namo, great compassionate Avalokiteshvara, may I soon transcend the ocean of suffering. Namo, great compassionate Avalokiteshvara, may I quickly achieve precepts, samadhi, and the way. Namo, great compassionate Avalokiteshvara, may I soon ascend the mountain of nirvana. Namo, great compassionate Avalokiteshvara, may I quickly dwell in the house of non-action. Namo, great compassionate Avalokiteshvara, may I soon unite with the Dharma nature body. If I go towards the mountain of knives of itself breaks up. If I go towards the boiling oil of itself dries up. If I go towards the hells of themselves disappear. If I go towards the hungry ghosts of themselves become full. If I go towards the Asuras, their evil thoughts of themselves are tamed. If I go towards the animals, they themselves attain great wisdom. These vows from Avalokiteshvara, according to the sutra, are purification vows. So having recited these vows, offered incense and bows at our own home altar if we have one, and cleansed our hands and face, we are ready to begin making the knot amulet. We'll now tie single knots individually in the ends of each of the 5 threads. According to the sutra, this removes from the body the weighty sins of births and deaths accumulated in hundreds of thousands of billions of kalpas. And we tie these knots while reciting Namo Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, Namo Amitabha. So I will recite those names and then tie a knot, and then repeat that for each thread. Namo Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, Namo Amitabha. 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 So I've recited 5 times, and tied 5 individual knots in the ends of each of these threads. Now we'll begin the Daihi Shin Dharani recitations with each recitation followed by tying a knot. And as I work with this thread, I will make an effort to keep them from getting tangled and also keep them from laying on the floor and picking up any dirt. So there are a number of variations of knot amulets listed in this ritual manual. All of them begin with 5 recitations of the Daihi Shin Dharani. There also are multiple translations or versions of the Daihi Shin Dharani, translations to English and transliterations from Sanskrit into Chinese and then into Japanese. So you may pick and choose as suits you which versions of the Daihi Shin Dharani you are reciting for the purposes of making this knot amulet. So I'll begin with the Daihi Shin Dharani transliterated into Japanese in the way that we chant it most often at San Francisco Zen Center. Namu karatan no toraya namu horiya boryoki chi shifuraya fuji sato boya moko sato boya moko kyaruni kyaya ensa haraha boryoki chi shifuraya somoko shitedo modora hodoya somoko. So having recited the Daihi Shin Dharani once, I now will tie 1 knot in the end of the threads furthest away from the end where I tied the 5 small knots. I just use a simple, what I know just as a simple overhand knot. Certainly there is room for other knots, whatever knot you may prefer, to mark and help count these recitations of these mantras. So I will now repeat that process, chanting the Daihi Shin Dharani, and then tying a knot in this end of the thread as well. Namu karatan no toraya namu horiya boryotedo modora hodoya somoko. And I'll now tie a knot in the opposite end, this being the end now that has the 5 individual knots. And I'll continue this now, chanting and tying a knot in the center. Namu karatan no toraya namu horiya boryoki chi shifuraya somoko shitedo modora hodoya somoko. So I'll now find the center of these threads and tie a knot to go there. We want to make sure that the threads are staying even with each other. Otherwise, as we're tying knots, we may start to get irregularities in the thread. We may get, we could have one thread that was not aligned with the others and maybe began to stick out, or pulled all of the others tight, something like that. So we just want to keep an eye on doing this with intention and care. I also find that as I chant, I tend to run the thread through my fingers. This just feels appropriate to me. It feels like helping to imbue the feeling of the Daihi Shin Dharani into the thread as we are chanting, and it probably also helps loosen up and soften this thread a little bit. So having chanted the Daihi Shin Dharani in its Japanese transliteration 3 times now, I'm going to do the next 2, which I'll be marking with knots in between the knots that I have already made. I'm going to chant the next 2 rounds of the Daihi Shin Dharani in the English translation done by Kaz Tanahashi and Joan Halifax. Homage to the 3 treasures, homage to noble Avalokiteshvara, noble Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, who embodies great compassion. Om. Homage to you who protect all those who are fearful. Being one with you, the blue-necked noble Avalokiteshvara, I bring forth your radiant heart that grants all wishes, overcomes obstacles, and purifies delusion. Here is the mantra, Om. You are luminous with shining wisdom. You transcend the world. O Lion King, great Bodhisattva, remember, remember this heart. Act, act, realize, realize, continue, continue. Victor, great victor, maintain, maintain, embodiment of freedom. Arise, arise, the Immaculate One, the undefiled being. Advance, advance. You are supreme on this earth. You remove the harm of greed. You remove the harm of hatred. You remove the harm of delusion. Lion King, remove, remove all defilements. The universal lotus grows from your navel. Act, act, cease, cease, flow, flow, awaken, awaken. Compassionate One, enlighten, enlighten. Blue-necked One, you bring joy to those who wish to see clearly. Svaha, you succeed. Svaha, you greatly succeed. Svaha, you have mastered the practice. Svaha, blue-necked One. Svaha, boar-faced One, lion-faced One. Svaha, you, holder of the lotus. Svaha, you, holder of the wheel. Svaha, you liberate through the sound of the conch. Svaha, you are the great staff-bearer. Svaha, you are the destroyer of darkness, abiding near the left shoulder. Svaha, you the wearer of a tiger hide. Svaha, homage to the 3 treasures. Homage to noble Avalokiteshvara. Svaha, realize all phrases of this mantra. Svaha, Great compassionate heart Dharani. As we tie these knots that are in the midst of our grouping of threads, I find it helpful sometimes to pull some of the threads individually in order to make sure that they all tighten at the same rate. Otherwise, it is possible to trap one of the threads in a somewhat looser state. You can get a little caught up in there. This just seems to help them settle in place. So I tied a knot here between two of our other knots, and I will now chant the Dharani again and do the same on this side. Homage to the three treasures, homage to noble Avalokiteshvara, noble Bodhisattva Mahasattva who embodies great compassion. Om. Homage to you who protect all those who are fearful. Svaha. Homage to the three treasures, homage to noble Avalokiteshvara. Svaha. Realize all phrases of this mantra. Svaha. Great compassionate heart Dharani. Sliding the two halves of this knot together also seems to help it settle in a little bit. So we have tied our first 5 knots at the ends of these threads, 1 small knot on each, and have now tied 5 Daihi Shin Dharani chanting knots at each end, in the middle, and then in between those spots. So there's now a number of options that are possible according to the sutra, a number of different ways to make Daihi Shin Dharani amulets. They all start with this 5-knot sequence. And then one option is to continue chanting the Daihi Shin Dharani and continue tying knots until you have 21 total knots. And that version of this practice is recommended for supporting practice to deepen your own intention and your own depth of practice. You can do those 21 total recitations, tying knots, and then you could keep this knot amulet near your practice space, or near your altar, or in a place where it will support and inspire your practice. Another option, which the sutra says is for protection from demons or disaster, extinguishing of karma, and benefit in future lifetimes. After tying these first 5 Daihi Shin Dharani knots, we then, for the remaining knots, the remaining 16 knots to take us to 21, we then would alternate recitations of 2 shorter mantras. And that is the option I'm going to use for this demonstration video. A third option, which the sutra says is for healing of injury or illness, is simply to stop here, to chant these 5 recitations of the Daihi Shin Dharani, tying knots, and to then tie this together and wear it near the site of injury or pain or illness. You might create and wear this yourself. You might create it and give it to a member of your sangha or community who is in need. If doing that shorter 5-knot only version, I think it would be perfectly appropriate to use a shorter thread than this 2-meter thread that I'm using. As you can see, there's quite a bit of straight thread between each knot, so you could use a shorter thread, and then your 5 knots would be more closely spaced together. And finally, a 4th option in the sutra is to use only white thread, and to use 5 white threads. Begin with that same cleansing ritual and the 5 knots in the ends. And then, as they say, recite the Dharani 21 times, tying 21 knots, and then wear that all-white knot amulet around the neck to alleviate fear and anxiety. So those are 4 options for making slightly different variations of this Daihi Shin Dharani knot amulet. As I said, I'm going to be doing what is listed in this ritual manual as option 2. This is for protection from demons or disaster, extinguishing of karma, and benefit in future lifetimes. So to do this version, I will alternate between 2 shorter mantras, which are also extracted from the Nilakantha Dharani Sutra. Namo Buddha Kunami, Namo Dharma Mahadi, Namo Sangha Tayeni, Dribubi Sattvayam Namo. So I've just placed this knot in between 2 of the existing knots, and this is my recommended procedure for getting these 21 knots onto this thread, is to just continue to find the longest straight pieces and just continue putting knots at the halfway points until you have done all of your knots. So I just chanted the first of the 2 mantras that we alternate for this option 2 version. I'll now chant the second mantra and tie a knot for that mantra. Sumdidi tusuza ajamidi uduza sumkiza bolaidi yamijaza uduza kuladiza kimoza svaha. And these 2 mantras are also transliterated from Sanskrit originals. I have not found any attempts to translate them into any English versions, but as is often the case with mantras and dharanis, it is considered that the sound is the important piece. And knowing what the intention is behind these sounds, we invoke that intention, we raise that aspiration that the mantra or dharani is calling forth, and we hold that in our hearts as we chant these sounds, so that we are imbuing the sounds with that feeling and that energy, even in the absence of knowing a literal meaning, if there is one remaining in these sounds. So I have just done 1 recitation of each of these shorter mantras. I will continue alternating these 2 mantras as I add additional knots to this protective knot amulet. Namo Buddha Kunami, Namo Dharma Mahadi, Namo Sangha Tayeni, Dribu Bi Sattvayam Namo. Sumdiri Tusuza Ajamidi, Uduza Sumkiza Bolaidi, Yamijaza Uduza Kuladiza Kimoza Svaha. Dharma Mahadi, Namo Sangha Tayeni, Ajamidi, Uduza Sumkiza Bolaidi, Yamijaza Uduza Kuladiza Kimoza Svaha. So one of the benefits of tying a knot after each recitation is I don't have to keep a specific count of how many recitations I've done. I can just count my knots and then find out how many recitations remain. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. I have 17 knots tied, which means there are 4 remaining. And as you can see, I have managed to put some inconsistencies into these, at least in this one spot. And my general feeling about tying these knots is, since each one is associated with a specific recitation of the Dharani, I am inclined to just leave these knots and leave the imperfections and things like this bit of thread which is not aligned with the others, as it is just what happened in the moment of creating this thing, creating this protective knot amulet. So I would recommend just leaving the imperfections as they arise. So I have 17 knots tied in this amulet. I have 4 remaining. And as I get down to these final knots, what I have been doing is just looking for the gaps between knots which are largest and placing the remaining knots into those places. So looking at this, it appears to me this is one of those locations that could use an additional knot, or would accept an additional knot. Namo Buddha Kunami, Namo Dharma Mahadi, Niladiza Kimoza Svaha. So I now have 21 knots in this 5-colored thread. And if I want to then tie it together, tie the 2 ends together in order to make a closed loop, either for wearing or for hanging on something, you could just directly tie that, but having recited something for each of these knots, it just feels appropriate to me to, in this case, actually recite something as I tie this final knot. And so I'm going to return to the beginning of this process and do the same recitation that I used for these 5 small knots in the individual threads, and I will use that recitation to mark the tying together of the 2 ends of this Daihi Shin Dharani protective knot amulet. Namo Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, Namo Amitabha. And so here I have created this large loop with 21 knots around it, and then this additional knot joining it into a loop. So thank you very much for engaging with this practice, if it should speak to you and if you feel moved to do so. Again, you can do this with whatever thread seems most appropriate to you. In this case, I have chosen the 5 colors of this thread to match the 5 colors which are most often used for Tibetan prayer flags, which seemed an appropriate choice for this particular ritual. I would also, again, encourage anyone who wishes to take up this practice to also discuss it with your own spiritual community, to discuss it with your teacher or teachers, and to discuss it with any Dharma friends, just to make sure that you're engaging in this practice in an appropriate and wholehearted way for your particular moment on this Dharma path. Thank you very much. Please be well and take care.